The night everything broke. The mansion was drenched in silence, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath feel like a burden. Ethan Carter sat slouched in his study, staring at the dim glow of the multiple camera feeds he had installed just 2 weeks earlier. Each screen was a window into the rooms where his children slept, but tonight, something felt different. A cold dread twisted in his stomach as he scrolled through the late-night footage. It was 3 a.m. when he saw her, Alana, his young maid, kneeling beside his son's bed. She was softly singing, her voice trembling with tenderness. Ethan froze, gripping the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. That lullaby, it was Rachel's. His late wife's voice lived on through Alana. His chest tightened, heart hammering painfully, as grief and guilt crashed into him in one overwhelming wave. For 2 years, Ethan had armored himself with money, work, and denial. He told himself he was fine, that his children were fine, that life could go on without feeling. But now, as he watched Alana cradle his son with the care and warmth he had failed to provide, Ethan felt his world shatter all over again. The screens went dark as he slammed his laptop shut. His body shook with sobs he hadn't allowed himself in years. In that instant, Ethan knew something had to change. Ethan Carter's life had always been defined by control. From a young age, he had built his world on logic, planning, and precision. Money came easily to him, success even more so. But when Rachel died in that sudden, cruel accident 2 years ago, control slipped through his fingers like sand. He had thrown himself into work, built more walls, more defenses. The mansion became his fortress, the cameras his soldiers. They watched over his children, yes, but also over him. They were the thin veil between him and a truth he couldn't face. That life had moved on without him, leaving him hollow. Alana had arrived at the mansion 6 months earlier. Barely 23, she carried herself with quiet dignity despite the hardship that had shaped her youth. Ethan barely noticed her at first. She was just a presence, doing her duties, never speaking out of turn. But that night, watching her sing to his son, something he had ignored for months hit him like a freight train. He refused to acknowledge it at first. It's nothing. She's just helping. Stop reading too much into it. But he couldn't. The memory of Rachel's laugh, the softness in her eyes, the way she had always held his children close. It all came rushing back. Ethan stayed up all night pacing, gripping the railing of the grand staircase, muttering to himself, trying to convince his heart to shut down. The next morning, he walked past Alana in the kitchen. She offered a polite nod. He responded with a curt nod of his own, avoiding her gaze. Every sound, every laugh from his children, now carried a weight he wasn't ready to bear. He found himself questioning everything, his ability to parent, his worth, even the meaning of life itself. Denial became his shield. He told himself he didn't need help, that the cameras were enough, that his grief was normal and manageable if he ignored it. But deep down, Ethan knew the truth. The loneliness in the mansion was suffocating. The nights felt longer, darker, emptier. He hadn't cried in months, hadn't laughed in longer. He was living, but not really alive. Alana, meanwhile, continued her work quietly. She noticed Ethan's withdrawn nature but respected the walls he had built. She cared for the children in small, tender ways, leaving notes, singing softly, offering warmth where the father could not. Her actions were quiet, unassuming, but they began to stir something in Ethan he had long buried, the longing for connection, for healing. One evening, Ethan caught himself standing outside his daughter's room, listening to the soft hum of her breathing. The sound was painfully beautiful. He swallowed hard, tears threatening to spill, and turned away. No, I am fine. I don't need this. I don't need anyone. But the thought that Rachel was truly gone, that time could not be reversed, gnawed at him. Denial was failing. The fortress of silence could not hold forever. And somewhere, deep in his chest, a small, fragile seed of awareness began to grow. That maybe, just maybe, it was time to feel again. Denial, Ethan quickly realized, could only last so long. Pain has a way of forcing itself into every corner of your life, no matter how tightly you try to shut it out. It began subtly, the soft laughter of his children in the garden, Alana's gentle encouragements, the way she remembered every detail of their routines. At first, Ethan dismissed it. It's nothing. I don't need this. But the emptiness that had defined his days suddenly felt like a gaping wound, one that refused to heal. One night, after a particularly tense dinner, Ethan confronted Alana. "Why were you in my son's room at 3 a.m.? His voice was sharp, more out of frustration than curiosity. Alana froze, confusion and guilt flashing across her face. "He had a nightmare, sir. I was just helping." Her vulnerability struck him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He saw her exhaustion, her sacrifice, her quiet courage. Ethan's chest tightened. "It isn't her fault I've been broken. It's mine." That night, he returned to the monitor, not to spy, but to observe. Alana quietly tucked his children in, hummed songs, whispered words of comfort. Ethan realized something that shook him to his core. He had been absent, not just physically, but emotionally. The cameras had captured only the surface of life. He had missed the depth of it entirely. Pain, as he came to understand, wasn't just a feeling. It was a teacher. Every pang of grief, every pang of guilt, demanded acknowledgement. And Ethan finally allowed himself to feel, truly feel, for the first time in 2 years. Days stretched into weeks, and the mansion's silence began to feel less suffocating but more reflective. Ethan could no longer ignore the presence of life around him. Each laugh, each small gesture, became a mirror reflecting what he had lost and what he still had the chance to reclaim. Alana's quiet dedication stood in sharp contrast to Ethan's own retreat into grief. She never demanded praise, never forced affection. She simply existed with a warmth that reminded him of what he had once taken for granted. Ethan began to watch, really watch, not through cameras but with his own eyes, seeing small acts of love, a gentle tuck of his daughter's blanket, the soft brush of a stray hair from his son's forehead. One evening, he found himself standing in Rachel's old music room, dust motes dancing in the moonlight. The piano sat silent, a relic of a life paused. He ran his fingers over the keys, hesitant, almost afraid to summon sound. Then, softly, a note rang out. He hesitated, then another, until the room was filled with hesitant, trembling music, the lullaby Alana had sung that fateful night. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as memories flooded him. Rachel's laugh, the scent of her perfume, the softness of her hand. That night, Ethan finally spoke to Alana, unguarded. "You knew that song," he said quietly. She looked up, startled but composed. "Your daughter sang it once. I learned it for her. She said her mom used to sing it." For the first time, Ethan admitted aloud a truth he had long denied. "Thank you for caring when I couldn't." The admission felt like lifting a weight off his chest. Reflection was painful. It forced him to acknowledge the gaps in his presence, the failures in his love, and the walls he had built around his heart. Yet it was also liberating. In that moment, Ethan understood that healing required not just observation but acknowledgement, a willingness to confront the raw, unhealed corners of the soul. He began to engage more, reading to his children before bed, walking through the garden in the evenings, sharing small smiles with Alana. Each act was a step, small but deliberate, towards reclaiming a life he had almost surrendered to grief. Reflection, Ethan realized, was not simply looking back. It was looking inward, confronting his anger, his guilt, his fear, and then letting it all coexist with the possibility of renewal. By the end of the week, Ethan found himself laughing genuinely at his children's silly jokes. The mansion, once a fortress of silence, began to feel alive again. He still ached for Rachel, but for the first time, the ache was not emptiness. It was a reminder of love lived, love lost, and love that could still be shared. Healing, Ethan discovered, was rarely sudden or dramatic. It was subtle, incremental, often found in fleeting moments that caught you off guard. One crisp morning, he accompanied his daughter to the garden, holding her small hand, and realized how long it had been since he had truly felt connected to her. Her laughter, unburdened and bright, filled the air. He noticed Alana nearby, kneeling in the soil as she tended the flowers, her presence serene and grounded. The contrast of life moving forward while grief lingered within him struck Ethan deeply. Later that day, he found Alana in the kitchen, visibly upset. Her voice trembled as she explained her mother's sudden illness back home. Without hesitation, Ethan offered support. "Take the next flight. I'll handle things here. Don't worry about a thing." Alana's eyes glistened with tears, a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, sir. You've already done more than anyone could have." In that moment, Ethan understood a profound truth. Awakening is about action as much as feeling. It is about stepping out of the shadows of fear and grief to embrace responsibility, empathy, and connection. By caring for someone else, he was caring for himself, slowly mending the parts of his soul he had left unattended. Evenings became moments of genuine warmth. Ethan tucked his children into bed, not as a ritual, but as an opportunity to connect. He laughed, stumbled through bedtime stories, and sometimes just sat quietly, holding their hands, feeling the pulse of life in his grasp. The cameras were forgotten. The walls he had built crumbled further, replaced by trust, understanding, and presence. One night, Ethan reflected on the past 2 years. He had been hiding, running from pain, denying love and life. Yet here he was, alive, capable of joy, capable of sorrow, and capable of connection once again. The awakening wasn't flashy. It was subtle, like dawn breaking gently across a darkened landscape. The mansion began to feel less like a fortress and more like a home. Ethan laughed openly at dinner, shared stories from his own childhood, and noticed how his children's eyes sparkled with curiosity, affection, and love. Alana, too, became more than a caretaker. She was a reminder of resilience, courage, and the quiet power of selfless love. Through these simple, everyday acts, Ethan's heart slowly unclenched. The grief remained, yes, but it no longer dominated him. It coexisted with the possibility of joy, of love renewed, and of life reclaimed. Awakening, he realized, is not about erasing pain. It is about integrating it, allowing it to inform growth rather than control existence. Months passed, and the mansion finally felt alive. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows, casting warmth on the wooden floors, illuminating the laughter of children and the quiet diligence of Alana. Ethan often paused to observe, not with scrutiny, but with gratitude. The house, once a mausoleum of memories, had become a sanctuary of life. Ethan no longer needed cameras. He had learned to trust himself and the people around him. The walls he had erected were gone, replaced by openness, empathy, and a willingness to experience the full spectrum of life. He took his children to the park, played board games with them, and even learned to cook simple meals, laughing at his own mistakes. One night, after tucking his children in bed, Ethan found himself in Rachel's music room once more. He pressed the keys of the piano, playing the lullaby slowly, deliberately, allowing memories of Rachel to flow through him without pain or guilt. It was cathartic. He realized that healing was not about forgetting or replacing what was lost. It was about embracing life fully, even with the shadows of sorrow still present. Alana returned after her mother's recovery, welcomed with warmth, not just as an employee, but as a valued part of the family. Her presence was a testament to the resilience of love and compassion. Simple acts of kindness had transformed Ethan's life as much as his own choices had. Ethan finally understood the essence of renewal, that peace is not a state achieved once, but a daily commitment to live consciously, to love fully, and to embrace vulnerability. He learned to forgive himself for the past, to accept loss as part of life, and to nurture the fragile bonds of trust, love, and connection that had survived despite grief. Sitting on the balcony one evening, watching the stars twinkle over the mansion, Ethan smiled. His children's laughter echoed in the rooms below. Alana hummed softly as she tidied, and he felt an unshakable calm settle in his chest. The soul-shattering grief of 2 years ago no longer controlled him. It had been transformed into wisdom, compassion, and a profound sense of purpose. Ethan had rebuilt more than a home. He had rebuilt a life. One grounded not in fear or denial, but in acceptance, love, and mindful presence. Moral of the story: healing is not erasing pain but embracing it, allowing love, kindness, and self-acceptance to transform grief into growth. True strength lies in vulnerability and the courage to open your heart again. Blackheart.